All right, here's a 7.1 homework assignment. 11 problems, meaning 10 you got to do, 1 you don't have to do. The first 2 are actually the exact same problem. It just randomly changes the functions that you see in these 2 spots. So hopefully, as it randomly generates the functions for your problems, you won't see the exact same thing in question 1 and question 2 here. I just thought it was a good problem to practice, so I put it in there twice. So in this case, I got sine of t times secant of t. So what I want to do is rewrite this in terms of sine and cosine, and then try to simplify this. Both 1 and 2 should simplify to either a single trig function like you saw in the videos, or sometimes if you get lucky, it's just a constant by like the number 1, for example. So simplify this all the way down, and when you get your final answer, it'll either be one of your 6 trig functions, or it'll turn out the number 1. Type that in here and you should be good. Question 2 will be just like question 1. Questions 3 and 4, it turns out, are also the same question. If you get really lucky, like I did here, you'll see the exact same thing twice, but typically it won't because it's going to randomly generate a function here and down here. So in my case, I got secant and cosecant both on the top and the bottom, but hopefully you'll see a different problem here as you see here. Much like 1 and 2, I wanted to put them in there twice because they're relatively easy, but they're good things to practice. Rewrite both of these in terms of sines and cosines, cancel things out, and it should simplify really nicely down to just a single trig function. Question 5 looks a lot worse, but I think what you'll find is, again, things are going to work out pretty nicely. In this one, you start out with only sines and cosines, so kind of your first step is done for you. Maybe you could think of how you could apply the Pythagorean identity, and maybe that'll leave you something where you can cancel out this square root and make this cancel out really nicely. Technically, I should add some restrictions so you don't have absolute value symbols in your final answer. So I'm going to add a little note to this saying that you can assume that t is in the first quadrant. All that's saying is if you simplify this to the square root of something squared, that square root and the square can cancel out. You can't cancel them out right now, but after you do some simplification, you'll be able to. Question 6, more of the same. It looks a lot different, but take the same steps. Change everything into sines and cosines, and then maybe you'll have some fractions inside fractions. So maybe you can make the top a single fraction and the bottom a single fraction by viewing this 1 as a fraction and getting a common denominator. And then when you have a fraction divided by a fraction, multiply by the reciprocal of the denominator and see how things cancel out. Same idea in question 7. It's a really similar format to what you see up in question 6, except because of the way they randomly change the functions, I'll do slightly different steps here is what I do here, but I think the overall feel of these 2 problems will be pretty similar. Then you get to question 8, the prompt's the exact same, the steps are the exact same, change everything into sine and cosine, make it a fraction divided by a fraction, divide those fractions by multiplying by the reciprocal of the denominator. Nothing to add in question 9. There's different ways you can solve this, but I think the easiest way to solve this will be doing the same steps that I outlined. Question 10 looks miserable, but I think it'll work out pretty nicely. You see a 2 here that you're not really used to. It might help to view this 2 as 1 plus 1, because then you'll have 1 plus 1 plus tangent squared x, and that 1 plus tangent squared x maybe you can deal with. That might not make much sense now, but I think when you're actually solving this, that'll help. My trick here is change this 2 into 1 plus 1. Question 11, I made this one extra credit. It's not really any different than any of the others, but it might just take a little while, so it seemed like a good one to make the extra credit problem. I think what you'll notice is because you have a product of 2 things, and each of those things is itself a sum, 1 plus something here, something minus something here, you're going to end up involving FOIL as you multiply these out. You'll want to get rid of these parentheses, and that'll involve FOIL. You'll still do everything else the same. You'll be changing everything that's not a sine or a cosine into a sine or a cosine. You'll be combining things so that they cancel. You'll be looking for your Pythagorean identity. But I think at some step you're going to have to involve FOIL, and for that reason it felt a little bit different than the rest of them. So I decided to make it the extra credit problem. That's this homework assignment. Hopefully it goes okay for you.